Welcome to a special new release edition of the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast, featuring an interview with Nicola Davison, Australian author and owner of Forever Young, a company that helps people write and publish the stories of their lives. And please remember that William Bernhardt's new novel, Exposed, the second book, Mackenzie Riviera legal thriller series, hits the stands today, October 26th. Now, enjoy the interview. This week on the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast.
Look, I come from a background in journalism, a couple of decades there, and I would have to say, if you're struggling to get your project finished, set yourself a deadline. Now, this could be when you're doing your writing sessions. You could set the egg timer or the alarm on your phone to give yourself a sprint to finish a section you might be wanting to get through or struggling to get through. But you can also set larger deadlines to finish a section of a project or a complete project.
Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Nicola, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
And I appreciate the scheduling because I know you're scheduling challenges since you're halfway around the world in Australia. And I'm thinking it's way early in the morning where you are. Am I correct?
Yes, we are ahead of you. It's actually a Sunday morning, not too early. Thankfully, I'm out of my pajamas and had my coffee.
Yeah, we don't care about the pajamas. That's fine, but you need to be awake. All right. Traditional first question for the podcast. If you could give a writer one piece of advice, and I bet you've accumulated many over the course of your career. But anyway, if you could give one piece of advice, what would it be?
Look, I come from a background in journalism, a couple of decades there, and I would have to say, if you're struggling to get your project finished, set yourself a deadline. Now, this could be when you're doing your writing sessions. You could set the egg timer or the alarm on your phone to give yourself a sprint to finish a section you might be wanting to get through or struggling to get through. But you can also set larger deadlines to finish a section of a project or a complete project. And this can be a soft deadline. Maybe you just want to mention it to your partner or your friends or your fellow writing buddies. Or it might be something really concrete, like if you're getting a book ready for a certain date. I'm mostly involved with life story writing, and this can tie in perfectly with milestones such as retirement or a milestone birthday or a family reunion. Something concrete is really going to get you moving to finish this project and really get those words down.
I think that's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard that answer before. I mean, a lot of writers feel like deadlines are the enemy. And, I could have made it so much better, except I had to turn it in, but not for you, huh?
Yes. Look, I've worked a lot in daily newspapers here in Australia and in the UK, and we'll have shifts with rolling deadlines for different editions. And there is nothing like the fear of the press room ringing you up with people standing at the plate and drivers ready to take those papers away. Yes, you really have to concentrate your mind and get things done. There's no mid-afternoon slump. Push on, and it is quite amazing what you can get done when you've got that motivation.
I can see where that would change your mindset. So how did you get started in writing? Was the initial dream to be a writer or a journalist or both, or what?
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Australia here in New South Wales, and my father was the country GP, or the town's GP. So come from a family of medicine, really, and so I was quite torn.
So do I. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
the
there was
black sheep. I get it.
Yeah, so I was sort of really torn of what to do, and I would go on rounds with my dad to the hospital and that kind of thing. But I think you do niche down, really, don't you? You do panel beating or you do surgery on your work. You're editing it very, very minutely, and so I thought, both worthwhile professions here. You're both serving and helping people, but if I mistype a headline, it's really not as bad as maybe potentially causing some fatal injury to someone.
Right. You get a redo.
This is true. But no, I did think, yep, journalism, I'll give that a go and see how it progressed. And yeah, I started out as a cadet reporter in a country town, progressed to sub-editing, layout and design, and then editing, and travelled over to the UK where I was working on a number of papers. I think we were doing 75 different editions a day, and doing 11-hour shifts with a big team of sub-editors, and incredibly exciting, and some very smart and witty people to work with.
And I can tell, though, just from the expression on your face, that you really enjoy this work. I mean, I love being a writer, but I don't think I would love being a journalist and having to, research and pester people and whatnot. But you enjoy your work, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I really do. You get to see a lot of things that you wouldn't normally, and every day is completely different. You might be, one day you'll be doing a lovely colour story on maybe someone's had a 60th anniversary, or there's a new development in town, or then you get to the harder news, breaking news, where there's accidents, or here in Australia we have a lot of natural disasters. It could be floods, it could be fires, or we have what's called cyclones, which I think is what you would refer to as hurricanes.
Oh,
So
wow.
yes, I have been that person out in the front lawn who, after a Category 5 cyclone, rigging my laptop up to the solar panel to file something to my editor for a daily.
That's a real public service, though. Just to be clear, because I don't think I said this before, you live in New South Wales, right? And you're kind of in the northern part of that, so you get hurricanes.
Yes, well, I did live in Queensland. Predominantly, it's in the northern half of the country, and yes, we do get them. We lived through a Category 5 cyclone, which I'm not sure if your category system is different, but it's the most extreme. And I've seen fully grown gum trees just blown at an angle, with all the birds coming down onto the ground, and storm surges covering roads. You could fish off your balcony. Just horrendous the way this wind carries on, like it is like being in an airport where there's a jet starting up beside you. But yes, we are a land of extremes. So,
but you're also near the beach, right? So pluses and minuses.
Yes, I love the beach.
You mentioned before, and I really want to talk about this, your work doing life stories. How did that begin?
Yes, well, as a journalist, you do encounter a lot of people, and you might be sent on a story that's maybe to do with a new development, but you end up talking to different people associated with that, and you find out a lot about them and the stories that don't make the paper. And I was constantly finding that, everyone that you meet really does have a story. And I really enjoyed doing feature stories, which is where you take a identity of the local town and you really drill down in depth for people about their life. So, and I got a lot of response from this. Like, out of all the stories I've written, a lot of people would come forward and say, I really love that one, or I love this one, and are all to do with profiles. And so as I got older and I had my own children, I started talking to my grandmother, who was in her 90s at the time. We were just reminiscing of how birth in her day compared to now, and child rearing, and having to not have electricity and not have your help and childcare, etc. And so I was really enjoying these stories, and she was loving telling me these stories. And I would get off the phone and try to tell my husband or my kids, and I would be like, I can't quite remember the details. So in the end, she was willing and I was willing, as the journalist of the family, let's write your life story. And that's where the journey began. Yeah.
So now you have your own company, Forever Young Autobiographies, right? And what is the enterprise of this organization? What do you do?
So founded this website to help people learn how to write life stories for their family and friends so that unique memories can live on for future generations. So I'm teaching people, yes, you can do this yourself. And it can be as simple as what I did, sitting down with my grandmother and just doing an interview, recording that on your phone or on your camera on your phone. Or it could be creating a feature article like I did so many times there in the newspaper world, or take it a step further and you're creating a book. So it could be your own story, you're doing it for yourself about your life, or you're interviewing a loved one and helping them record their life story.
Right. And who ends up doing the writing? Would that be you?
No, I'm equipping people with the skills to do it themselves.
You can't do them all anymore. Now I'm getting the picture.
Yeah.
That's really a nice service, because I think there are a lot of other people. I remember when my father retired and was basically grumbling, what am I going to do now? I've been practicing medicine since, before the dawn of time. And I said, well, now you can write your memoirs. And he just looked at me like, yeah, that sounds like the most boring thing I can ever imagine. I think there are a lot of people who, would like to have a book and would like to get all this written down, but they can't do it by themselves. They need somebody like you, right?
Yeah, so that's my aim. And people, we take it for granted, but we naturally are inclined to write. But not everybody is like that, or is in their professional life had exposure to writing. So it is daunting. It can be overwhelming. A full life is a lot to cover. So I try and break it down into 4 key steps. So it's very manageable and achievable.
What are the key steps, if I may ask?
Sure. So I break it down into first, maybe pause before you put pen to paper. Do a little bit of planning so you get off to a good start. And then you have your writing phase, which is first draft. If you're doing a book, doing a first draft and then subsequent drafts. Then comes the editing phase, the polishing phase, which often people say is the bulk of writing, the rewriting.
It's when it gets good anyway. Yeah.
And the final phase, of course, is publishing in whatever format you've picked, and then celebrating it with your friends and family, or if you choose, a wider audience.
There must be an enormous amount of research involved in something like that. I mean, of course, you're going to talk to the subject, but maybe even beyond that. How far do you go when you research these?
Look, it is up to the individual and what sort of story they're writing, because if you're doing a full autobiography, then that can go a little bit before the birth of the subject all the way to present. But then if you're doing a memoir, that's a slice of time of a life. So it might be concentrated. But yes, there is a lot of work to do around bringing your memories to the surface and gathering those, and then prioritizing the key ones and the key events that you want to touch on in your work.
I know in the writing world, although this is perhaps more in the world of fiction, but people debate whether you're a planner or a pantser, meaning you write from the seat of I don't think this could be done. Just, I'm going to go in and wing this person's biography. I think you must be planners, right?
Yes, I'm naturally inclined to be a planner. I'm not against pantsterism, but look, I think a little bit of planning, even if it's just a really rough chapter outline, gives you something to go on with. And in life story writing, I think too, a lot of projects, not a lot, but sometimes they can be derailed for a number of reasons. Could be health issues, for example, or just life getting in the way. And if you have had a plan to tackle the key memories or the key events, so you've hit those first. So if you do abandon the project, you've got the essential information down. You haven't sort of gone off on down a rabbit hole into something that's probably not substantial or the best things you could leave behind.
Right.
Because, it's like an insurance policy, I think, if you do a rough plan and you hit those key memories and events first.
I like that. I normally say roadmap, but insurance policy, I mean, it's really true. I tell people whatever you're writing, if you'll just do an outline, the chances that you will finish it actually finish the book, not the outline, are immensely increased just from having done that. Well, have you noticed any patterns in this work, or any stories that, or people, or kinds of stories that seem to occur or come more frequently?
Oh, look, I think as people get older, there's definitely
Mhm.
a bulk of the people I encounter are writing when they're maybe retired and they have more
Mhm.
time on their hands. But
Right.
likewise, it can be a younger crowd who maybe have had a real obstacle they've overcome. Maybe it's a traumatic brain injury,
Mm.
or they've had some other trauma in their life. They're common topics for life stories.
Mhm.
But look, I think it can apply to anyone. Everyone
Right.
and anyone, given the right audience, has a really interesting life story to tell.
Sure. And you're helping them create a legacy, which I really don't think could be undervalued. I seem to keep dropping back into my own story. This because it's life story time, I guess. But I had an aunt actually who, I think she'd always had writing aspirations, but when she retired, she wrote basically family history. She and her 8 siblings, one of them my grandmother, and she wrote the story of their life growing up, which I don't know what other people, but and I was very young when she did it, but I thought this was wonderful. I learned so much that I never would have known about some family members, some of whom I'd never met. But all of that it's important to me and it's important to others, and all of that would have been lost if she hadn't sat down in this pre-word processor era and just typed it up.
Well, that's it. There's some really strong reasons why
Hmm.
people choose to write life stories, and you've just covered a lot of them there. You want to convey that basic information, and who were your ancestors? And then you cover birth, childhood, the different phases of your life, and it can be, a lot of people find, really satisfying to do this work, whether
Hmm.
it's for yourself or for a loved one. It's cathartic. It can be healing, some people say, or rewarding. And in my grandmother's instance, I found it a real bonding exercise. It was almost like an act of love for her, because she then had something to share with her kids, her
Hmm.
grandkids, and
Right.
now great grandkids. So yes, it does leave a lasting legacy before those memories fade. And we
Right.
remember those who have passed, who might not be here and able to write their own memories.
So you've been writing for a long time, journalism, profiles, life stories, whatnot. Are there any, people listening to the podcast are always looking for writing tips? This will be the thing that bumps me up to the next level. What are some of the things you've learned along the way that you felt like improved your writing?
Yes, look, I think going back to the basics is
Hmm.
having a really clear idea of what you're trying to write and
Hmm.
why and for who. So that's
Oh.
really critical. I think you got to have that clear from the get-go. And then, of course, you want to make sure you've got a good outline, or you've got a good plan of how to achieve this dream or this goal. I think
Hmm.
that's really critical. And surrounding yourself with people who want to support you, have a bit of accountability.
Always valuable. Mm.
Very, very valuable. But I would say that there's some key practical tips. But in terms of the hard work of doing the writing, of course, you want to really do a first draft and ensure that you are putting truth first. I think that's a critical thing when you're doing life story writing, is to focus on being truthful, because as readers, we know that life, it deals you the light and the shade. It's not all
Right.
sunshine and rainbows.
Hmm.
So you really do want to make sure that you're covering the positives and the negatives of a life, and that is difficult sometimes
Right.
for people to write truthfully. I know it is hard, but it can be as simple as verifying all the facts that you have in the book. Really important from a journalistic point of view. You're putting it out there. You want to verify as much as possible so that it is a truthful account. But you can also check things for truth by asking and interviewing others. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's very helpful, but often it can be contradictory. So
memory is fragile, right?
Mm-hmm. But you can attribute their views and what you remember, and then leave that up to the reader to form their own opinion. That's completely fine. And other times you might need to, as a writer, use logic to come up with a hypothesis of what you think really happened, why and how. And you can use your creative thinking to do this, but you do need to flag to the reader, of course, that you're doing this, but you've spent time considering it with all the available facts, and this is what you think. And being truthful too, as a journalist, I know you need to be persistent. And sometimes if something doesn't feel right and it's not stacking up, then check your facts, try other avenues or a new tact of inquiry. Follow that sixth sense. And yes, you might uncover some mysteries, secrets, and solve those in your life story writing.
Nice. Hey, on your website, I saw a picture of you holding a camera. Are you doing photography for these things too?
Look, I have done photojournalism at art school, so I'm a practiced photographer, which is what is really, with the digital format, we all write and take photos these days in journalism. But I do, yes, enjoy taking photos. I have a lot of kids. They seem to appear in most of my photos these days.
Right. I get that.
So, yeah, but I do enjoy photography.
Do you have a regular sort of writing practice, like you get up at 5 and you start, or does it just depend upon the story or what you're doing right now?
Yeah, I'm mainly organising articles and case studies for my website. So I do start early in the morning. I try to get in that quiet hour before my house comes alive.
I get that totally, yes.
So yes, I'm usually out here every day, hot weather, cold weather, rugged up if need be, and typing away. So yes, the time flies when you get in the groove and the words are flowing. So yes, mornings are best for me.
How long has this has Forever Young Autobiographies been in existence, I guess?
Look, I started it back in 2016. So this is about the time. Yeah. I was helping my grandmother write her life story. And I was getting requests from other people who were finding out that I was doing this. And
before you'd even finished? Wow.
Yes. So it was a longer process to create my grandmother's book. I had newborns, and she had a number of operations and health issues, and we lived 6 hours apart. So there was some things that obviously I interviewed her over the phone that could be done easily remotely, but then the actual coming for getting the photos to include in the book, the historical photos, and I needed to sit down with her and tee that up in advance so that we could travel there. So, yeah, we finished her book last year for her 100th birthday.
Oh, how nice. That's perfect.
Yes.
Well, let's say somebody listening to this podcast is interested, either having you write their story or maybe writing for you. How does anybody get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, if you're listening to the podcast, you can find me on your podcast player, Forever Young Autobiographies, or on YouTube. I'm on YouTube as well, Forever Young Autobiographies. But my home is foreveryoungautobiographies.com is the website.
That's the website. And just to be clear, you were talking about a podcast because you do a podcast as well on a regular basis, right? What's on the podcast?
Sure. I usually do a combination of things. So each episode could be I interview someone who's finished their life story. So I delve into what they've done, their writing process, any challenges and rewards they've gotten out of that. So they're the case studies I feature. Also, I'll do book reviews of award-winning books. So people could get inspiration by reading the best of the best. And I break that down and give some writing lessons we can learn from each book. Then there's lessons on life story writing across those 4 steps: the planning, writing, polishing, and publishing. And then there's some other just random things that I feel like writing about. So, always different, always entertaining, and I hope helpful for those starting out writing.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like a great undertaking. Any plans for the future? What's next for Nicola?
Yeah, so look, I've been busy organising plans to start an online writing community. So that is in the pipeline. If anyone is interested, please come over and sign up for my regular newsletters, and I'll be letting people know about that probably towards the end of the year.
Fantastic. Hey, Nicola, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.